My name is Aloan Vale, and I spent the last 12 years making Vale Luxury Stays the best place for mountain vacations. We had the most beautiful lodges, cabins, and homes for families to enjoy the Blue Ridge Mountains. I worked very hard every single day, making sure everything ran perfectly. I built the development division of the company from just 4 people to 80. Every property I brought online, every permit I got, every team member I trained, everything I did helped the company grow. The money from my projects even paid for my little brother Lucian's private jet and the fancy car that his girlfriend Marlo drove. Yesterday, everything changed. Lucian, my younger brother and now CEO of the company, leaned across the boardroom table, looking angry. His face was red, and his hands were tight on the table. "Apologize to my girlfriend right now or you're fired," he growled. My parents, sitting quietly at the table, just nodded. They didn't even try to stop him. Their faces looked proud, like they were enjoying the drama. I looked straight at Lucian and said one simple word. "Fine. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where are you watching this from, and what time of day is it?" This morning, Lucian strutted into the office, smirking, thinking he had already won. He was ready to enjoy the satisfaction of finally making me obey him. But when he walked in, he stopped suddenly. My desk was completely empty. No pictures, no awards, no paperwork. Nothing. In the middle of the desk was a letter. It was my resignation letter. The company lawyer, Cashin, ran in behind him, looking like he had seen a ghost. His face was pale. "You didn't send this, did you?" he asked, almost whispering. Lucian's smug smile disappeared instantly. The room went completely silent. Everyone just stared. If you've ever been pushed out by family or people who are supposed to care about you, you know that silence can feel like it weighs 100 pounds. That's exactly how it felt in the boardroom that morning. Everything that led up to this had started 3 days earlier, with a single video call. Marlo, Lucian's girlfriend, had taken it upon herself to try and close the biggest deal in company history. On the screen were ultra-rich investors from Charlotte. They wanted 42 custom mountain lodges built at the Ridge Collection, one of our most exclusive projects. Marlo, wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big and a smile 3 sizes too confident, promised them full turnkey delivery in 11 months. Now, anyone who had ever worked with architects, contractors, or the local permitting offices in western North Carolina knew that 11 months was completely impossible. The absolute earliest these lodges could be built was 28 months. That was without any weather delays, and assuming the supply chain worked perfectly. I was looped into the call at the last second because the investors specifically asked to speak to the head of project development, which happened to be me. As soon as Marlo finished talking, one of the investors turned to me and asked directly, "Is 11 months realistic?" I didn't hesitate. "No," I said. 28 months is the absolute earliest. And that's only if everything goes perfectly. Marlo's confident smile froze. The investors thanked us for our honesty and ended the call. 2 hours later, I sent an official follow-up email to the entire investor group, copying the board and Lucian as CEO. The subject line read, "Revised realistic timeline and cost breakdown." I attached a full feasibility study, all the permitting schedules, contractor quotes, and a line-by-line budget. I showed why trying to finish in 11 months would either require cutting corners or lead to a multi-million-dollar lawsuit when we inevitably missed the date. It was a professional, honest, and necessary email. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Lucian stormed into my office, with Marlo trailing behind him, acting like she owned the place. "What the hell is this email?" Lucian shouted, slamming his phone onto my desk so hard the screen cracked. Marlo folded her arms and added, "You just made me look incompetent in front of people who were ready to wire $20 million. I stayed calm. I was correcting an impossible promise before it turned into a legal disaster. That's my job. Lucian's face turned bright red. "Your job is to make the company look good, not to throw my girlfriend under the bus," he said. Marlo jumped in again. "She's jealous," she said. "She's been jealous ever since Dad made you CEO." Lucian puffed up his chest, like the title of CEO still felt exciting and new. "Apologize to Marlo for undermining her, or this goes to the board as insubordination," he said. I looked him in the eye. I said nothing. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stood up and walked out while Lucian kept talking to the air. The board members stared at their laptops as if they had just discovered some very interesting information. My parents didn't even try to stop me. I took the elevator to the 5th floor, to the corner office that had been mine for 12 years, and started packing. The view of the Blue Ridge Mountains stayed the same, but everything else suddenly felt borrowed. First, I packed the framed permits for every property I had brought online since I was 26. Then I carefully wrapped the awards from the North Carolina Vacation Rental Managers Association, 3 years in a row for Best Luxury Portfolio. I wrapped them like they were someone else's memories. Next, I packed the team photos, 38 people who had trusted me to fight for proper budgets, schedules, and quality, while Lucien handed out bonuses to his friends. I had built the development team from 4 people to 80. The money from my projects paid for Lucien's private jet and Marlowe's fancy car. But every Christmas, my mother would introduce Marlowe as basically part of the family, while she asked me when I was going to settle down and give them real grandchildren. Growing up, favoritism had been subtle but constant. Lucien cried when he got the new bike. I earned straight A's. Mom would say, "That's expected from the older one." When Dad stepped back 3 years ago, he didn't hold a search or even look at who was performing best. He just handed the CEO title to Lucien at his 27th birthday party in front of the whole company. I stood there holding a slice of cake while everyone clapped for my little brother, who had never closed a single deal on his own. Mom pulled me aside that night and whispered, "Don't make a scene, Aloan. This makes your father happy." From that day forward, Lucien signed the paychecks and Marlowe started showing up to executive meetings in 6-inch heels, giving advice nobody asked for. Every time I pushed back on corners they wanted to cut, Mom would call me afterward. "Be supportive. He's your only brother." I kept packing. The ridiculous world's okayest sister, mug Lucien gave me as a joke 1 year went straight into the trash. The emergency binder I built with 300 pages of contractor contacts, permitting shortcuts, and crisis plans stayed on the desk. Someone else could figure out how to finish the Ridge collection without it. My phone lit up with messages from the team. Callum wrote first. "They just announced you're suspended without pay until you apologize. What the heck is going on?" Then Serafina. "Is this real?" Dorian sent a simple skull emoji. I typed one reply to the group. "Take care of yourselves." "I'll be fine." Then I put my phone face down and kept packing. By 6 o'clock, the office looked like I had never existed. 4 cardboard boxes and 1 rolling suitcase held 12 years of my life. I loaded them into my Jeep, shut the door, and sat in the quiet parking garage for a long minute. The weight I had carried since childhood, the constant pressure to prove I belonged, suddenly felt lighter than the boxes in the back. I drove home through the mountains as the sun dropped behind the ridges, already knowing exactly what I had to do next. That night, I sat alone in my downtown Asheville loft. The boxes from the office were still stacked by the door. I opened my laptop and created a new folder titled Everything. For 5 years, I had quietly saved every single piece of evidence against Marlowe and Lucien. Every time Marlowe swapped premium cedar siding for cheap pine to pocket the difference. Every time she forced contractors to sign secret agreements for kickbacks. Every time she promised a client an impossible completion date and then blamed my team when it couldn't happen. I dragged in the Oriolawanal architect drawings marked approved next to the cheaper versions she actually built. Vendor invoices showed huge markups that went straight into her cousin's company. I had recorded calls where she laughed about how nobody ever checked the fine print. Text messages to her friends bragged about the new handbag each closed deal bought her. I built subfolders like a careful lawyer. Folder 137, overpromised delivery dates. Folder 2, proof that these promises had already cost the company $430,000 in unplanned overtime. This was just the beginning. I knew that the next steps had to be smart and careful. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to fight in the open. I had to make sure everything I had built over 12 years, every single proof of hard work, every detail, every correct decision, was safe. I had to protect the team that trusted me, the investors who believed in us, and the company I had built from the ground up. Packing had given me time to think, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the unfair favoritism. Free from the constant pressure to make my little brother look good while his girlfriend took credit for my work. Free from the house rules that said the older child had to step aside for the younger one. Free from the guilt I had carried for trying to do the right thing. I finished my packing and looked around the office one last time. I knew I would never work there again, at least not under their rules. I drove home as the mountains glowed orange in the sunset. It was the kind of peaceful scene that made everything feel possible, even if it had taken leaving everything behind to get there. Once I was home, I carefully went through all the proof I had collected over the years. Every overcharge, every shortcut, every impossible promise, all of it went into my folder. Every time Marlo had laughed about cheating the company, every time she had stolen credit for the team's hard work, I saved it. Every secret agreement, every text, every invoice, every email, it all went into everything. I knew what I had to do next. I didn't have to rush. I didn't have to yell. I had the evidence, the proof, and the team who trusted me. I had spent 12 years building Vail luxury stays into the company it was. Now it was time to make sure it stayed that way, even if I had to leave the building to do it. Folder 36. There were still problems with mold in some houses my family owned, and some people were suing us because of it. Some of the houses had serious damage from water and humidity, and it wasn't fixed properly. My mom and dad had allowed the builders to remove the special barriers that keep the houses dry. They did this just to save a few dollars, $8 for each square foot of the house. I couldn't believe it. This was dangerous. People could get sick from mold, and the houses might even fall apart if the problem got worse. I opened my work contract, the one I had carefully written myself when my dad stepped down as CEO. I always wanted to make sure I would be protected if something went wrong. Section 8 was very important. It said that if the company tried to punish me without proof, I would get 8 months of salary right away, and all my stock would immediately become mine. This stock was very valuable, and it meant I could walk away with a lot of money if they treated me unfairly. Yesterday, they tried to suspend me. This meant that, because of the contract, I would get $680,000 in stock the next day. I sat down and wrote my resignation letter quickly, in just 10 minutes. I made it polite but very clear. I explained that I was leaving because of the 2 important rules in my contract, and I asked them to send the money to my bank account by the next day. Then, I wrote an email to everyone important. I sent it to every board member of the company, every bank officer who had given us loans for construction, and all 42 investors who were waiting for the Ridge homes to be finished. I attached the folder with all the evidence about what had been going wrong in the company. I locked it with a password and included that password in the email so nobody could say they hadn't received it. I hit send at 11:52 p.m., right before midnight. I wrote a second email to my lawyer, Thayer Rhodes. It had only one line. The severance clause has been triggered. Please be ready with instructions tomorrow. I knew my lawyer would handle the rest. The third email went to Lysandra Vail, the recruiter who had been trying to hire me for 18 months at a big luxury rental company. The subject line of the email said, "Available immediately." I wanted to make sure that if anything happened, I already had my next opportunity waiting. I closed my laptop, finished the glass of wine I had poured, and went to bed. I slept deeply and without dreaming, something I had not done in years because of stress. By sunrise, my phone was already buzzing nonstop. Board members wanted emergency meetings. Investors were demanding phone calls. One frantic voicemail from Cashin, which I didn't even listen to. I got ready for the day. I chose my charcoal suit, the one I wore when I closed the biggest deals of my life. I picked up the watch my dad had given me on the day Lucien became CEO, but I decided not to wear it. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, ready to collect what I had earned, and I didn't look back. The next morning, at exactly 8:30, I walked into the building one last time in my charcoal suit. Security saw me but looked away. The elevator ride felt really long, even though it was just a few floors. I was calm, but my mind was racing. I had planned every step of this, and now it was happening. When I reached the executive floor, Lucien Marlo, my mom Isolde, my dad Thaddeus, and Cashin were already waiting outside the boardroom like they were about to stop me. It looked like a badly rehearsed scene from a play. Lucien spoke first, his voice shaking a little. "We need to talk before this goes any further." I kept walking. They fell in step around me, trying to surround me, but I didn't flinch. Cashin stepped forward, clutching a legal pad like it could protect him. "Eloan, the email you sent is catastrophic. Investors are threatening to pull their money. The banks are on the phone. We can fix this if you retract it immediately." I stopped in front of the boardroom doors and faced them. "No," I said firmly. Lucien stepped closer, his eyes red but dry. "You're destroying everything we've worked for because you're jealous. Just admit you made a mistake." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out 2 crisp copies of my resignation letter and the severance demand. I handed one to Cashin and one to Lucien. "Effective 5 minutes ago," I said. "Section 8 of my contract is very clear. 8 months' salary plus immediate accelerated vesting of all restricted stock, $680,000 at yesterday's close. Wire instructions are attached. I expect confirmation by the end of the day. Cashin flipped through the pages, his face turning pale. This will bankrupt the company if the stock vests today. I gave a small, calm smile. Then you should have read the contract before suspending me. My mom tried to speak, her voice trembling. Eloan, honey, think of your father. Think of the family name. I looked at my dad. He hadn't said a word. His eyes were fixed on the marble floor. Isolde tried again, softer. We can work this out privately. Come inside. Sit down. Let's talk like we used to. I smiled for the first time that morning. It wasn't warm. There is no we anymore. You made that choice the moment you stayed silent while Lucien threatened to suspend me for telling the truth. Lucien found his voice again. You can't just walk away with almost $700,000 after trying to burn the company down. I stood tall. I'm walking away with exactly what the contract I negotiated says I'm owed. The company is burning because of 5 years of documented fraud you refused to see. Cashin tried one last time. If you withdraw the email right now, we'll forget the suspension ever happened. Full pay, backdated, whatever you want. I took one step closer until I was looking him dead in the eye. Cashin, that email is the only thing keeping 42 investors from suing us into bankruptcy today. You want it gone? Tell them yourself why their homes won't be delivered for at least 2 more years and why half the materials were swapped for garbage. I turned to the rest of them. To be perfectly clear, I am no longer an employee. I am now a very large shareholder who just watched management commit fraud. My lawyer, Thayer Rhodes, will be in touch. I started walking again. Isolde reached for my arm. I stopped but didn't turn. Eloan, please, she whispered. I looked back over my shoulder. No, Mom. You broke my heart a long time ago. I'm just finally done paying for it. I walked away. No one followed this time. The elevator doors closed on 5 stunned faces. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely, perfectly free. Less than 2 weeks later, the Ridge collection officially exploded. 38 of the Oriolaunal 42 investors filed a joint federal lawsuit in Charlotte, demanding $32 million in compensatory and punitive damages for fraud, breach of contract, deceptive trade practices, and negligent misrepresentation. The 187-page complaint quoted my email verbatim. It attached every invoice, change order, and recorded call I had sent and added new exhibits the banks quietly produced once the construction loans fell into technical default. By the time the filing hit the court system, every major real estate blog in the Southeast had the headline. Callum held on for exactly 9 days. On the 9th morning, he marched into Lucien's office, placed his MacBook on the desk, and said, I'm not wearing an orange jumpsuit for any of you. He resigned on the spot, signed my new employer's offer that same afternoon, and took 12 of the best senior project managers with him before the week was out. The ones who stayed were either too inexperienced or too terrified to leave. Neither group knew how to finish 42 ultra-luxury homes that were suddenly missing half their structural beams and all of their promised timelines. The company went into a full meltdown. Emergency board calls at 3 a.m., crisis PR agencies on 6-figure retainers. Lucien flew first class to Charlotte twice in 4 days, begging the lead investor for a private settlement. They escorted him out of the building and had security walk him to the curb. Then, on a cold, rainy Thursday night, my phone lit up with the old landline from my parents' house in Biltmore Forest, the number I hadn't answered in years. I let it ring 5 times before I picked it up. Isolde spoke first, her voice trembling so hard the speaker crackled. Eloan, honey, we're all here. You're the speaker. I heard Thaddeus, my dad. He cleared his throat, sounding exhausted. We were wrong. Completely wrong. We see it now. We're so sorry. Lucien jumped in, frantic. The banks are calling every loan tomorrow morning. If we lose the Ridge, we lose the company, the house, the planes, everything your father built. Everything you built. It's all gone unless you help us. I heard the unmistakable thud of knees hitting the hardwood floor in the living room I grew up in. Isolde started sobbing openly. We're on our knees, baby. Please. Lucien again, voice raw. Come back. 6 months consulting only. Name your price. 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, whatever you want. Stock, cash, you write the number. You're the only person alive who can still salvage this. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my new corner office in Charlotte, 30 floors above the city, watching rain streak down the glass. The same city where the lawsuit had just been filed. I looked at the rain and felt a calm settle over me. I had done what I needed to do. I had stood up for what was right, and I was finally free from the lies and corruption that had surrounded me for so long. No one could take away my freedom. No one could make me feel trapped again. I had finally taken control of my life. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let anyone, no matter who they were, make me feel powerless again. I was in the same city where my new title, Executive Vice President of Development, was already printed on the door. I waited quietly until the crying on the other end of the phone slowed down and became just little hiccups. Then I said the only sentence they would ever hear from me again. Never again. I ended the call. I blocked the landline. I blocked Lucien's cell. I blocked Isolde's cell. I even blocked the house number one last time, just to make sure they couldn't reach me. I set the phone face down on the desk, turned back to look at the rainy city skyline, and felt absolutely nothing at all. 18 months later, Vail Luxury Stays didn't belong to the Vail family anymore. A group of private investors from Atlanta had bought it for a very low price. Only 42 cents for every dollar it had been worth before the big lawsuit. They kept the company's name, but fired 2/3 of the staff. The rest were turned into simple property managers for the few houses that had survived foreclosure. Lucien was fired the same day the sale finished. No goodbye party. No extra money. Security took him to the parking lot with a single box of his things. Everyone said it was because of gross mismanagement, and that investors had lost confidence in him. But everyone really knew the truth. The new owners didn't want anyone who had been part of the scandal near the company. Marlo lasted only 1 week after Lucien lost his job. She packed her designer bags into the Land Rover, left the keys on the kitchen counter, and disappeared. 6 weeks later, people heard she had moved to Miami with a 39-year-old nightclub promoter. Lucien's social media went quiet the same day. My parents sold the Biltmore Forest estate 3 months after the sale. 8 bedrooms, 12,000 square feet, 40 years of memories. They sold it for less than they owed the bank. The Florida condo sold next, to a buyer from New York, for very little money. My parents moved into a small 2-bedroom rental in Hendersonville. It was the kind of place they had used to joke about when driving past it on the way to fancy charity events. Meanwhile, I became Executive Vice President of Development at Apex Mountain Residences, the biggest luxury vacation rental company in the Southeast. For 10 years, it had been Vail Luxury Stays' biggest competitor. My first official act was to approve a 48-home community on the ridge across the valley from what used to be Vail's Ridge Collection. Now that place was a half-finished ghost town with empty frames and leaning buildings. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Callum ran construction. Serafina handled permits. Dorian managed design. 12 former Vail employees were now in top roles at Apex. Every single one of them had a story about the day they decided loyalty to the Vail family name wasn't worth losing their career. I still lived in the same Charlotte loft, but the view had changed. My office was 32 floors above the city. The homes I controlled had tripled. Revenue went up 47% compared to the year before. At the annual meeting, the board gave me a standing ovation when I showed them the numbers. I never looked at the old Vail website again. I didn't need to. The new owners had erased every trace of the Vail family from the About Us page. The only reminder left was a faded bronze plaque in the lobby of the Oriolawanal office building. No one bothered to take it down. Some nights, I drove an hour back to Asheville just to see the lights of my new development shining across the valley. Bright, clean, and on schedule. The old Vail Ridge stayed dark. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel sad. I just felt finished. The story was over, and I had written the last line myself. Then one day, a text appeared from 3 numbers I thought were gone forever. The first was Lucien's old personal cell. The second was Isolde's. The third was the ancient landline from the house that no longer had our name. They had created a group chat called Family. Lucien wrote first, shaky words even on the screen. "Eloan, we know you hate us. We deserve it. But please just 1 dinner, 1 hour. We want to look you in the eye, explain everything, and apologize properly. No excuses, no asking for anything, just us saying we're sorry for the rest of our lives." Then Isolde sent a voice note. 31 seconds of crying. "Baby, I was blind. I chose the wrong child every single day. I see it now. I lost you and I lost everything else because of it. If you never speak to me again, I understand, but please let me say it to your face. Just once." Thaddeus sent 1 photo. It showed all 3 of them sitting on a simple couch in a rental living room. I didn't recognize it. They were holding a handwritten sign that said, "We were wrong," in thick black marker. Another message from Lucien said, "We'll come to Charlotte or meet anywhere you say. Neutral ground. We just want 5 minutes of your time before you close the door forever." I read every word twice. Then I pressed and held each of their numbers. "Block this contact." "Yes. Yes. Yes." The screen went quiet. I set the phone on the marble kitchen island, poured myself a glass of water, and looked out over the city I now called home. They finally understood the cost of choosing favorites instead of being fair, of choosing comfort over truth, of choosing the easy child instead of the one who carried the weight. I wasn't going to give them the relief of hearing my voice. Some apologies arrived too late to matter. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. I had built a life without them. It was brighter, cleaner, and more honest than anything they had ever offered. The chapter ended the day I walked out. Today, I simply turned the page and kept reading forward.